What's up, everybody? John Eric Poli here with My MMA News, and today's guest is known way before today's current day UFC. He was doing things before it was cool, pioneer of the sport, first guy to win two championships in two different weight classes in the UFC, Hall of Famer. Now does great work for the PFL, where he's an analyst and a color commentary. Pleased today to be joined by Randy Couture. Randy, thanks for being here, man. Really appreciate the time.
Thanks, John. Appreciate you having me on, buddy.
Hey, no problem at all. And let's get right into everything here. I know at the time we're recording this, you're coming up on the seventh week of the PFL Challenger Series. And the Challenger Series is such a great idea for the PFL to do. Great way to sign up and coming talent. Just your thoughts on the season so far and how it's been. Has anybody caught your eye?
Well, we've obviously we're handing out contracts left and right this year's Challenger Series, and last year's Challenger Series kind of set the pace. I like that it's a no-nonsense kind of a business approach to ferreting out and finding new talent that potentially have an impact in the regular season in the PFL. Last season, we saw Carlos Leal and Delano Taylor come out of the Challenger Series and move into the regular season. And, Carlos made it all the way to the semifinals, Delano Taylor all the way to the finals. So obviously there's some great talent out there. We're not locking anybody in a house and seeing what kind of craziness comes out of that. It's about, as you would expect with the PFL, go in the cage, show us what you can do, show us what you got, show us the goods, and hopefully you get the nod and get a crack at being in the regular season. So I definitely like that approach.
And the regular season coming up right around the corner here. April 1st is the first event. Before we get into that, just talk about your excitement, too, to work with the crew once again. Obviously, you guys have a lot of great people there at the PFL. Kenny Florian's a great guy. Lillian Garcia, I've interviewed her for the last few years. She's awesome to work with, too. Just what's it been like working with that crew?
It's been amazing, yeah. And obviously there's been some shifts and changes as we moved into, we're starting our fifth season here coming up. But I feel like I'm sitting with two of my college buddies watching the fights from the best seat in the house. Sean and Kenny do a great job. I've been very impressed with Sean to see him, flourish and step into that role as the main guy, doing all the nuts and bolts, the ins and outs. That's not easy stuff to do, and he does a great job. Obviously, he knows Kenny and I well. He sets us up well. He knows which guy to ask which questions to, and just we have a lot of fun. We tease each other. We just have a great time. It's a great place to be.
All right, let's start diving now into this upcoming PFL season here a little bit. Obviously, the big storyline before you get into any of the weeks here is Kayla Harrison. We know the way last season ended, not obviously on a high note for her. She was obviously crushed by her first pro loss there. Kind of has been quiet since then, just a little bit there. Just how do you think she's going to bounce back, and how much are you looking forward to seeing her now growth as an athlete and responding to that loss?
Yeah, you know what? I think she handled that loss like a champ. She really did. She stepped up. Yeah, it sucks to lose. There's no other way around that. But she embraced that. She faced that adversity head on, as you would suspect from a tournament sport athlete like Kayla, who's been in some huge tournaments and managed to go all the way through, obviously win two gold medals in judo. So I was very, very impressed with her. Saw her right after that fight, obviously very, very emotionally upset with the loss, but this is the sport of MMA. It's going to happen sooner or later. It's going to happen, and I think she's done a great job. I saw Kayla last week in Ohio. She's in great spirits. She's back to get putting work in. Looking forward to stepping into the pay-per-view model for the PFL, moving down to 145, and I think she's got a great shot at being the champ again at 145. I don't think she's going to enter the regular season. I think she's going to go to like I said, they're going to start the pay-per-view model here for the PFL pretty soon. And she's an amazing star that the PFL has built. So I'm excited to see her in there. I think we will see Larissa Pacheco in the regular season. So, there's the potential for the first two weight class champ in the PFL right there in Larissa Pacheco in the regular season. It'll be interesting to see how all that unfolds. Larissa's going to be tough to beat. If she can make that weight at 145, she's going to be very, very tough. I would like to see Kayla get a crack at a rematch with Larissa at 145 at some point in the pay-per-view model. I'd pay to watch that.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, Kayla's not going to have any problem selling pay-per-views either. I know she's been blossoming into quite the star on the women's side of the sport there. But let's move along to a few other matchups here. Week one, there's a big one. Brendan Loughnane taking on Marlon Moraes. I know obviously a
Yeah.
lot of fans are just excited to see how Marlon's going to come back. He's been on a tough little stretch going against a guy that won the tournament last year. Big matchup there, week one.
Yeah, it's going to be a great one. Obviously, Brendan's got amazing striking, but surprisingly showed some great wrestling ability in a couple of his matches last year as well. He saw a potential weakness in his game. He went and attached himself to some of the Dagestanis that are wrestling and fighting in the PFL and tried to up that part of his game. And he showed that a couple of times last season in his championship run. I don't expect that to be any different. Shimon Moraes is a very, very good striker, but he's also a Brazilian black belt, and it's going to be interesting if he can get this fight to the ground and kind of take it out of that strength with Brendan and Brendan's striking. It makes for a great matchup.
Then in week three, I saw this and my eyes lit up. Oliver Aubin Mercier versus Shane Burgos. That's a fun one.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mercier is about as calculated as they come. And he lays the game plan out and figures out how to stay on track and in that game plan to find ways to win. And he's been very, very impressive with his championship run last year, too. I think he's going to have his hands full in that matchup.
All right, so this next guy I want to ask you about, I don't know if you want to talk as an analyst or as a guy that was a former fighter. A lot going on with this athlete here, Anthony Pettis. I know it's been a tough stretch for Anthony as of late there. I know he obviously has so many fans from back in the UFC days. He accomplished so much then, the Wheaties box, the whole 9 yards there. I know a lot of people really want to see him get back on the winning track there because he's so much fun to watch. Do you have any advice maybe to him as like a former fighter, or even if you want to go put the analyst hat on here, just how you think he's going to respond after last year?
Well, I think Anthony is Anthony. He's an amazingly talented guy, one of the most exciting and explosive fighters we've seen in the sport over the years. Yeah, I think he underestimated what he signed up for when he signed with the PFL. I think he sort of slowly started to figure out that he had to front load his camps and manage things a little bit differently. It's not the typical model that we see in prize fighting where you might fight once a year. You're definitely signing up to fight potentially 4 times if you want to win the title. So I think he sorted out some of that, and we've seen him come back, but we still, you can't underestimate people. And just because he's a marquee guy and has that name because of his history, guys like Clay Collard and some of these other guys that maybe haven't achieved the accolades that he had are still very formidable opponents. And I think that's something that the PFL does very, very well. And I think we'll see Anthony come back, and I think we'll see him continue to win and continue to flourish. He just has that ability.
All right, so now I know we covered a lot of the bigger names here in the PFL, but there's somebody out there maybe that you think people they don't have their eyes on that's going to stand out this year, make a big run at something this year?
Well, I mean, we saw Delano Taylor make it all the way to the final and come up a little bit short in the final from the Challenger Series. So I think you're going to see him come in and really kind of find and show some confidence from that experience last season. I expect big things out of him this year. I think we'll probably see him come all the way through again. He's got a ton of talent and a ton of ability, and he's still very, very young. So it's going to be interesting to see how he deals with a full season, not having to come through the Challenger Series to get it, and just focus on that regular season, those playoffs, and that championship this year.
Okay, so to end, I have 2 more questions. I want to actually go back now to college wrestling. So I know when I opened this interview up, right, I mentioned everything you accomplished back when you were a fighter. We obviously talk about current day now as an analyst, and I'm sure obviously everybody knows you obviously through those UFC days, but I'm sure, a lot of people maybe forget that you were once a wrestler at Oklahoma State, and for anybody that grows up wrestling, they wish they could wrestle at a school like Oklahoma State, accomplish what you accomplished. Just what was it like back then, number one, and then number 2 as the second part of the question, March Madness. I like it better than March Madness. That's coming up here in a few days. You plan on watching and keeping an eye on that?
Absolutely. Obviously, I'll be here working the Challenger Series this week and next week, so I'm not going to be able to be in Tulsa at the NCAA championships for wrestling this year. I'll be definitely rooting for my Cowboys. They're up against a pretty tough field. I don't think people realize what a grind the NCAA championships are for a wrestler. Making weight 3 days in a row, wrestling 5 matches in those 3 days to be a champion. It's a grind for sure, and it's as tough as it gets. So it's been fun for me when I retired from fighting in 2011 to kind of re-plug back into collegiate wrestling and international wrestling, Greco and freestyle. Got to go to the World Championships in Vegas, been to the NCAA's a few times, and got to kind of plug back in there and watch what's going on in the sport. And we're seeing what guys like Bo Nickel now make that transition to MMA from the college wrestling ranks. And he was certainly one of the best, and now just won last weekend on Saturday in very, very impressive fashion. So you see, look across the board in just about every promotion, there's a lot of top wrestlers that are winning titles. I think this sport has become the outlet for amateur wrestling now, and to be a professional athlete, and we're flourishing in mixed martial arts.
All right, man, just got one last thing for you now here. So I'm going to go back to Team Quest, right? That was in the state of Oregon. I've yet to interview an athlete from the state of Oregon or anybody that's trained in Oregon. So I have to ask this question because not a lot of people probably know this that follow the sport of mixed martial arts. But so I actually grew up, I competed in track and field. So I got to ask from the Oregon days, know who that guy is?
That looks like the runner Prefontaine from down in the University of Oregon, and he was involved with the founding of Nike, the big shoe company. A very, very good movie out about Prefontaine and what an amazing runner he was.
You hit the nail right on the head. He was a great guy. And he did a lot, actually, for a lot of Olympic athletes, too, because back in the day when he was running, too, you had to be an amateur athlete. So you're living in trailer parks on food stamps. You don't get to live the lifestyle that they live today. So, yeah, Pre's a great guy. I'm glad that you knew that, too. I was hoping one to get Chael Sonnen on to ask him since he went to the University of Oregon. But I'm glad I finally got somebody with some type of Oregon roots somewhere to know who that guy is there. So, anyway, awesome. Man, I know you have other obligations to get to. I really appreciate the time here today. Last thing before you head out, you have any social media that you have to plug or any sponsorship type of things, anything like that? Take it away. Floor is yours.
Yeah, well, just check us out tonight. Light heavyweights getting after it on Fubo TV for the PFL Challenger Series. It's going to be a great night of fights.